this is going to be a very, very interesting day and quite a long day. And this session is like the curtain raiser. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to Artisan First, which is a virtual showcase of the finest crafts and artisans of India and Sri Lanka to start with. And this has been put together by us, India by Hand, together with AOD of Sri Lanka, and our partners from AOD are on this call as well. So how the day goes is that we have one session after the other, and we take a break between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock. And throughout the day, we're going to see some incredible examples of crafts, artisans, crafts-based businesses. And I'm really thrilled that this session kind of has been set up to set the tone for it. And you know, India by Hand started with a dream 2 years ago, dream of showcasing the finest crafts and arts and culture of India to the world. And very soon we realized that there is no showcasing without, you know, taking care of everybody in the ecosystem, and most importantly, the producer, the artisan, the craftspersons, which is what brought us to Artisan First. And also I'm thrilled that we have on the panel today two people who've been part of the dream right from the start, and a new guest who brings a unique global perspective. So let me introduce our panelists. First up, Mita Kapur joining us from Jaipur. So Mita is founder of Siyahi, founder of Soul Connect, a crafts expert with vast experience in Rajasthan. She's also the director of the JCB Prize for Literature. We move on to Nandita Palchoudhuri from Calcutta, my hometown. I'm here as well in the same city. Nandita, once again, consultant, crafts curator, ex-chairperson of the India Foundation for the Arts. Again, huge experience and expertise in working with crafts and folk arts in West Bengal and elsewhere in India. And as well as Mr. Kelvin Sargent from the ILO, from the United Nations Specialized Agency ILO. Kelvin's joining us from Delhi. He's originally from Trinidad and Tobago. And he looks after sustainable development enterprises throughout South Asia. So he brings a unique South Asian perspective to this whole thing. So as I said, this session is kind of to hear you expert panelists kind of set the tone for the rest of the day. And so we, you know, Mita, probably I'll just start with you.
Sure.
So, you know, we have a figure, and no figure in India is absolutely black and white, but we have a figure like that there are 7 million registered or artisans in the country, and about 30 million people connected to them who are involved in the world of crafts. But I'm sure the figure is far bigger. So India has an incredible handcrafts heritage. Everybody knows that India's crafts and traditions and heritage are unparalleled, but our share of global handcrafts exports are less than 2%. So again, we know that there are lots and lots of challenges. What are you seeing in your vast experience and deep connections in Rajasthan, for example? What are some of the challenges that you see in the craft sector, and how have they been aggravated by COVID?
Actually, thank you, Argha, for once again for having me on this panel. I don't have that vast an experience, but I'll try. As far as Rajasthan is concerned, and because we run Soul Connect experiences and through which we showcase our crafts and our heritage and even performing arts in Rajasthan, the first question was of mere survival.
Right.
I have to applaud my partner Vinod Joshi, who actually took it on himself and created something called Project Hope, in which he appealed to people just to make sure that the artists that were with so many of them are in remote villages, and with the highways being completely blocked and no supplies reaching them, he managed to get permissions, and he managed to help more than, I don't know how many families. I have the statistics. I can email a PDF of this. This is what Project Hope looks like.
Okay.
And Vinodji is a noble soul, and Soul Connect and I are really, really fortunate that we have a partner like him. He reached out to me, and I reached out to some friends, and a lot of people sent money across. And there is this whole brochure which tells you at what rate, what rations were bought, and those families were at least made to survive. That was the first step taken. And the next step that he's taken is that, and it's a very small example that I'm trying to give, but it is a very humane example, is that he started something called Play from Home. So look after musicians and folk artists from Rajasthan, and they're collaborating while they're in their homes with artists across Europe. Like he started with an artist in UK. This is just one small example, but what I what strikes us right now is that the challenge here is that we have to, and as Nandita was saying quite correctly, we have to not yearn for the past.
Mhm.
We have to find opportunity in what we have been plated out because of the pandemic and
Mhm.
because of other natural disasters. What I see in India is that we, and I really want to grab this as an opportunity, what we have is our skills, we have our hands, we have our weavers, we have our printers, we have our embroiderers, we have our people who dye. I mean, there are so many dyeing techniques. There are even the work making technique, for example. Um, now, how do you, and even our traditional food, even our miniature paintings from
Yeah.
Rajasthan. I'll
Mhm.
give you two small examples. The amount of home chefs that have sprung up.
Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing it across the country, right?
Mhm.
So now is the time that you sustain, you collaborate, you partner, you share, and you become each other's strength instead of becoming a competition to each other. Okay, the idea is that you survive and then you move on to these kind of strengthening tactics, so to say. And especially when it comes to the artisan, and when I'm saying the artisan, I mean all kinds of craftspeople, right? Um, Even a miniature painter, like for example, I know this lady who works directly with artists, and she's not doing it for profit. She's
Right.
basically doing it as a non-profit. So, and I wanted a painting from for behind my bed. And the tree of life is not something that a miniature artist will by convention produce,
Mhm.
right? But I just kind of asked her, will they? And she said, yeah, sure, give me the dimensions. And I wish I should have taken the painting down from behind my bed. But that painting came in the middle of the pandemic when the lockdown had the first thing had just uh, lifted off, and managed to just get it framed last week. And it's every time I walk in, I get so much joy because I went directly to her. Can I give this person business? You know, and I want the artist to sign. So I want, what I'm dreaming of here is, and I may be sounding very idealistic, but can the distance between the curator and the creator be reduced? The
Right.
directness of dealing with artisans, what they have as their products, can the thought behind our consumption, we are still going to consume those products,
Mhm.
right? But the thought behind the consumption has to change. The ideology has to change. So somewhere I want that distance to be reduced, and I feel that small efforts can be made, and eventually, and we're looking at going local, right?
Right.
We're looking at going, even with food, we're looking at, we always looked at seasonal,
Mhm.
but even with food, like I cook all kinds of cuisines, and I'm now I'm trying out recipes in my kitchen where I can substitute products that I'm not getting, let's say, for
Exactly.
a teppanyaki or for an Indonesian
Mhm.
whatever, and I'm managing it beautifully, and I think what's coming out is just fantastic. So there is that search for opportunity in what's been plated to us.
So no, absolutely. And again, coming to Nandita, what are you seeing in West Bengal, where you've been connected to Bengal crafts and arts for a
So
very long time?
I'll answer your question in two parts.
Yeah.
The first question that you had asked was, what do you think are the challenges to the
Right.
artisan?
Right.
The main challenge that I feel exists for the artisans and I've noticed this over the 30 years that I've been working with them directly,
Mhm.
is that the construct around which they work. So the relationship of the craftsman and the product to begin with was for a community that was around him. So the artisan knew his market,
Right.
and he was producing continuously for that.
Mm-hmm.
But what has happened in the last few decades is that he's beginning now to produce for a market he does not understand.
That's right.
Unfortunately, what has continued to happen in India and probably elsewhere is that the traditional artisan is still producing what he was producing 100 years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
that has beauty, it has grace, but it doesn't have the functionality that it was designed for.
Right.
Because the artisan's production is where it was, but the society and its demands and its functionality have shifted quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So people like, say, Mita, me, and so many others have stepped in to become that kind of interface to connect the artisan and his skill sets to market demand. So the main, I think, problem that artisans across the board, and I've kind of worked with artisans throughout India, face is exactly the same, that they are creating products without knowing who's consuming them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that is the main challenge I feel that needs to be overcome. And that is not the challenge only to be answered by a designer, but it's a challenge of distribution, it's a challenge of inventory holding, it's a challenge of pricing it right, it's a challenge of, reaching it to a market that it's appropriate for, and so on. And answering the second part of your question, which was about what COVID has done, and
Right.
in it, COVID, that terrible cyclone in Bengal,
Right.
if I take Bengal as the small geographic area. Right now, to me, the artisan is not the artisan who produces products. He is a human being who doesn't have a house over his head,
Right.
doesn't have the economy that feeds him.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the first response that everybody probably needs to have, whether it's an artisan or it's just anybody else, is that how does livelihood come back? How does restoration of the day-to-day life come back? Of course, along with this kind of complete denudation of the economy and their access, because there's no local transportation working, there's a death in production, in sale, in the market, and as it is, they live on the edge of trying to survive. So this kind of a 3-month body blow is something that I think is very, very serious and very, very difficult to come out of.
Yeah, and we saw that. I will just take a minute to see. I believe Kelvin was having some problems, so let me just check.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Fabulous. Oh, fantastic. So, Kelvin, you've been hearing Mita and Nandita, and obviously, I'd like to ask you, with your unique perspective across the region, across South Asia, what are you seeing? Are there similarities that you see across? Because I believe you look after from Afghanistan to Maldives and the Indian subcontinent as well. What is the state of challenges of the small businesses, of crafts-based businesses?
Thank you, and morning, everybody. Happy to be on this esteemed panel. Happy to be here this morning. And before I want to start, I want to say that today is SME Day, and I just want us to remember that and to salute all these people involved in SME, and to underscore the importance of SMEs as important creators of jobs and survivability in many of the countries. No, I think I agree with both Mita and Nandita in that I think SMEs and certainly people involved in crafts and artisans all over the world, particularly in South Asia, they tend to face similar challenges. I think a major challenge, of course, is that of access to finance. Okay, the lack of finance access, and that access comes in a number of forms. One, lack of collateral. Two, the interest rates may be too high, or the term may also be too long. So there's always the issue of financing and finding money and whatnot to do what they want to do. The question of access to markets, of course, because as someone said, you're producing and you're making a lot of things, but you may not know who your customer might be. I remember I had an experience when I was in Jamaica. Right. I was at a hotel in Jamaica on mission once. And the artisans make lovely things, all kinds of lovely things for their hands and whatnot. But they actually had to sail up on a boat, right, from the sea to get to the hotel. to meet the customers, to hope that they will get somebody to buy what they were selling. So this is one of the challenges there that you could see, the markets. There's the question of stigma and discrimination. These people are small, what they're doing is small, it's not important, the stigma attached to it. And because of that, people don't like to give them value for money. So people try to undersell them, people try to beat them down in price, people try to exploit them. And another challenge, of course, is that unfortunately, a lot of these artisans are informal. They operate informally, they're not registered, they don't have a registration number. So you have these challenges and whatnot, okay? And because of that, they can't get benefits from the bank, from the educational system. They don't have access to training, and all of these things are challenges that I have found, throughout this region. So these are critical issues that I think that we need to look at. The whole ecosystem, the whole SME ecosystem, I think, need to be analyzed. Artisans are important, but they're being treated like any other informal business, but the structures are not built around them for them to be, successful. The policies and the enabling environment, very importantly, the enabling environment for their development is not there. It's not in the way that we would like it. So I think those are some critical challenges that I have seen for this region.
And I think that's pretty much common across the region. So I'll get back to Mita, and just, you had already, Mita, started talking about some of the components of the solution. So what is the way forward? What are the 2 or 3 critical things that everybody in the supply chain must do to move forward?
So looking at, it always starts with, I think, government support, which I think for the craft sector, although directives have been issued that, there are no markets and you need to re-engineer yourselves, but the way forward in terms of policy is still to come. When Kelvin and Nandita were talking about the various problems and the entire ecosystem that has to be recreated, and when I want to link this back to what I was saying in the beginning, where I feel that the artist or the craftsman or the artisan, whoever it is, needs to be the direct person to deal with.
Right.
I was talking more in the sense of removing the middlemen. But Nandita's question again was that person doesn't know whom he's creating for. So that there is where Kelvin's point comes in, that access to market. So it's something that this ecosystem, maybe some sort of collective, because this is something that under Soul Connect we had dreamt of in the beginning of this year, and then the pandemic happened, was that we wanted to put a bevy of artists and craftsmen from Rajasthan under one umbrella, so that there's something called, you're creating and you're directing your product, but then we wanted to support them with an e-commerce site.
Right.
So my point here is that India's diversity and plurality is in itself a challenge for us, right? So I think state-wise, if there is some sort of movement between all of us that we can collaborate, and then maybe make it a nationwide movement. Again, I'm sounding very, very idealistic, but somewhere somebody's got to dream big and start small, and then join the dots, because I don't see any other way forward.
Well,
there are challenges, like Nandita said, about inventory, etc., etc. I just wanted to make one more point very quickly. When I'm talking about the artist being named, the first thing that gets neglected in our country and does not literally exist is recognition of intellectual property ownership.
Right.
Copyright holding, trademarking. Simply because, again, it's an expensive process for that tiny artisan living in the fringes of a particular state or on the borders or whatever. But somewhere I think that also has to be kept in mind, because look at the way people are getting, I mean, come on, what is this Dalgona coffee thing? Guys, I'm just giving a very basic example. or turmeric latte. You see how many patents would just get stolen from our country.
What about moringa?
Yeah, exactly. Moringa. Moringa is the latest one, by the way. Yeah.
Mita Kapur, close to you in Rajasthan, the most glaring example is the Nimura song. Today, the copyright of Nimura belongs to Sanjay Leela Bansali. And if a
Exactly.
Rajasthani folk artist has to sing it, or perform it, he has to take his permission. So I'm on this panel for the national juridical universities who are trying to evolve copyright solution for the community, for artisans. And we just go back and forth because it doesn't belong to a single artist.
Right.
So if community owns the rights, then there's an intra-community battle. That, I mean, who is the one who's going to allow it and who's not? So it's a very kind of
it's actually quite a filthy scene, you know. But the thing is, I feel that now when we are looking to find opportunity within this adversity, can we look at everything from scratch? And exactly, you're making such a valid point. I was talking about a writer yesterday because I represent writers, and I'm trying to. This writer of mine is writing a web series, and he was basing his story on the life of someone. He said, "Mita, should I talk?" And we are in we're negotiating the contract. He said, production house. I said, you know what? Do not name the person, please. Do not give your idea away right now.
Right.
Can we just not do it? That's how careful we have to be. But point is, how do we educate the artist who's living in the Shekhawati region, or the artist whom that was another example I wanted to give. Was a friend of mine in Chennai wanted to gift all the elderly women in his family something that they would cherish. So he called me and I said, you know what? There is this artist in Momasar, again through Vinodji. He paints the entire Hanuman Chalisa on canvas. Would you like to give that? And he got 5 made. Okay. So, but then somewhere that registration of that this is my creation of the Hanuman
It's
Chalisa,
a tough one. It's a tough
my creation of life, my
Today-
rendition of.
Today, fortunately,
How does one educate people?
I mean, absolutely. This kind of a discussion, Mita, I was even going to ask you about writers, but obviously, this kind of once we start this conversation, it goes on for a long time. We obviously, so I'll just go to Nandita for a minute and ask you, Nandita. I know that you've been involved in a number of interesting projects where you've tried to connect artisans with retail and looking at that entire, because you were talking about that connection, right? Is there any learning from there that you'd like to share with us?
Very quickly, I've tried it in 2 ways. And the first model that I was to be, my ambition was to be become redundant as soon as possible by being in a triangle. So there were the artisans, there was me, and there was the commissioning agency. Now, I'll give you an example. Say the Edinburgh Festival. Now, they wanted a gate to be constructed on the Royal Mile. So the design that I suggested to them was a gate made out of shola. Now, what that does is that it builds the best practices of shola into the community where it's being produced. And we start looking at things that shola artisans or Indian artisans usually don't look at. That is longevity, that is transportation, that is how do you design something for a specific site and not the way you've been doing traditionally. So this kind of hand-holding to create a gate that was made in Bardwan, that's a village area of Bengal, transported by ship to Edinburgh, and then reconstructed actually in Glasgow and transported to Edinburgh, teaches the artisans all the other skills that he does not have but needs to be able to be viable as a business person. Because, it's not enough to create a pretty looking thing in your village. You have to make that pretty looking thing valid where it can be sold at a price that is justifiable. So the first model that I used, and I worked with like this all over the world with different crafts, was to handhold a craft group. And when the whole entire process was complete, I would make myself redundant and they would continue to do that kind of work. And subsequently, what we started doing is I do one pop-up, very high-end exhibition. I give the most successful of which has been with Baro in Bombay. So I take 5 artisans. I work with them. 5 artisans mean 5 different types of artisans. Work with them throughout the year to teach them the entire gamut of, they know everything about producing the product, but the design of the product. So we are making very large room separators, wall hangings, lampshades, and things like that with Shola, which is traditionally not its end product. So that kind of design workshopping I have to do with them, the costing of it, the way it's packaged, the way it's transported to Bombay, the kind of cost that adds on, the transportation of the artisan himself to be able to go and present his product in the exhibition in Bombay, to be able to speak about it, to have signage that is appropriate, to have labeling that describes what he has done. This whole thing, I work with them for the whole year. And then at the exhibition, once they're able to sell and the money is electronically transferred from the Baro kind of finances to their account, completes that cycle of training. And then I exit that model and they continue with Baro. And I take on some other artisans and some other destination for their product. And this has been working well until COVID.
No, fabulous. And there are a lot of examples today we will see of some of these things, except which are really enlightening. And we'd love to carry on this conversation again later and also highlight maybe the Baro example, maybe West Bengal next time. I'll come back to Kelvin for the last part of the discussion. Kelvin, so again, hearing all these things, is there, what kind of institutional support or government level support or support from institutions like the ILO, etc., are available to these kind of small businesses in the region or in India and Sri Lanka specifically?
Yeah, sure. So no, I think first of all, you need policy. You need to create an enabling environment for these enterprises and these artisans and crafts people to exist. And that enabling environment must consist of one, access to markets. It must be protection in terms of intellectual property and trademarks. It must deal with cluster and clustering policy, okay? And it must deal with technology, very importantly. And finally, education and skills training. I think you need all of these things in that policy, the enabling environment, first that you need to create, all right? I think the technology is very important in terms of the markets, to understand the markets, because different kinds of markets require different things. A young person will require a different thing from someone who's older or 50 or 60, as the case may be. So the younger people, you need to know how to do Instagram, for example. How do I get markets using Instagram or Facebook? Pop-ups, I heard somebody said earlier on, how do I get to know these things? So you have to understand this technology, because particularly coming out of COVID, I don't think we'll be seeing much face-to-face happening for the next couple of months. We don't know really the trajectory of what will happen in the next 6 months or 12 months. So we have to start thinking in terms of technology, using Instagram, using Facebook and other media to get our message out there, to get people to know what they have to sell, to get people to understand their product and so on. And I think something that's always forgotten, and this is where the institutions will come in, is the role of education and skills training. Education and skills training, a lot of these people start, yes, they know how to do things. They're very good in terms of their skills and their artisans, but a lot of them don't know how to start a business, how to manage a business, how to grow a business. This is very important, and we tend to forget that. This is where the ILO can come in. We at the ILO, we have a number of programs and so on that we have one called Start and Improve Your Business. We call it SIYB for short. And what we do there is we actually take, we work through trainers, a lot of whom we have in India already. And these trainers or master trainers, as we call them, they actually work with the beneficiaries, teaching them how to start a business, from the business idea, how to do a business plan, how to do a marketing plan, how to do basic financing. They don't need to know about balance sheet and all of that, but they should at least know how to do basic, financing, what is our income, what is a sale, what is an expenditure, how to do a simple cash flow statement. Simple things like that will make a big difference, I think, in the lives of these artisans. So I think if we put all of these things together, if we have the enabling environment, if we have the access, the technology, particularly the protection, and if we get the skills training and so on that they need, I think it will contribute tremendously to what they do and to their very existence. The way found this has worked tremendously in a number of countries all over the world. Of course, the challenge is that, okay, you know, they may not know access to information is important. A lot of the times they cannot spare the time to go and do the training because they have to be out there, you know, making, as we say, a hustle, trying to make a living. So we have to find mechanisms and means to also have them trained if you have to do it on evenings, on a Saturday, on a Sunday, but you have to find mechanisms and procedures and processes to get them trained to ensure that, you know, they can be, because at the end of the day, my thinking is that they must be sustainable. We're really about sustainability. So yes, everybody can start a business and be an artisan and whatnot, but sustainability to me is the important point, and we must try in all that we do to help them to be sustainable.
Well, absolutely. And thank you very much for that message, Kelvin. And we've got like 10 seconds before I need to hand over to our Sri Lanka colleague. So I'd like to just take this time to first of all thank our panelists. This is a conversation that can go on and on. And I hope we hope to be able to organize these kind of sessions for a longer period. But I just like to quickly point out that the rest of the day today, starting with Sri Lanka right now, we see incredible examples. And I think this is the first time ever. We are traveling virtually to Ladakh up in the Himalayas. We're going right down to Kerala in the lush backwaters of Kerala. We're going to Sri Lanka. We're going to the Kutch region. We're looking at artisans. We're looking at their lives. We're looking at their challenges and what they're doing, and also looking at their work. And all this is happening through technology. I mean, physically, we are not able to do it today. But even if we were able to, it would have been impossible to have a day where we could go to Ladakh, to Kerala, to Sri Lanka on the same day. So we are just doing it through technology, and I hope it's going to be a great day. Thank you again very much, Nandita, Mita, and Kelvin for joining us. And thanks for
everything. Our pleasure.
Thank you. And I'm going to hand over to Robert.